Here with Eric, we're in the AHR booth. So Eric is with Nibe. Can you tell us a little bit about Nibe, Eric, and what they do?
Yeah, well, we've been engaged in heating and climatization for some 70 years.
Wow.
And in heat pumps for the last 40 years. And of course, that's what we mostly are known for. Almost half of our turnover is in the heat pump industry, starting in Sweden, growing into northern mid-Europe, and now being represented all over Europe, and since 11, 12 years also being represented in North America through various companies.
So I find what's really interesting is I know about your company, but your company in North America may not be that well known outside of HVAC nerds like myself. So can you tell us, like, in the North American market, who do you not own that does geothermal heat pumps? You have EnerTech as a partner, you have Water Furnace, you have Climate Master.
Yeah.
Why did you guys decide as a company that you wanted to come into North America and pick up these key geothermal manufacturers?
Well, our experience is that the most difficult thing is to find good, loyal people. So if you acquire an established company, you get the brand name, you get the presence in the market, and you also get the management. It would be almost impossible for us to do that in a short span of time, because we are, after all, fairly local, a Swedish company, so this is so much quicker. And then by acquiring several companies, you also allow a broader expansion. We don't try to interfere whatsoever. The brand names, they're still in existence, and the management continue. And of course, we benefit from procurement, you can say, but independence is very important for us. That's how we practiced for the last 35 years when we started to acquire companies, to remain independent, to be autonomous. But of course, there are certain targets that we have to live up to.
Yes.
But as an umbrella company, if we might say, we have very, very few employees. We're only 8 individuals.
Wow.
So operationally, that's what counts.
Yeah. So what is really interesting to me, well, right off the bat, Eden Energy, where I work, when I'm not on camera here, we're a very large water furnace customer. So it's funny standing in the EnerTech booth. Yeah. But what's interesting to me is that you have these companies, and they're all really different, right? Like Water Furnace is very well established residentially, Climate Master is established commercially, and EnerTech has their own niche.
Yeah.
Where do you see the future for geothermal in North America? Like, where do you see this market 10 years from now, if you had your way?
Well, I think that the heat pump market is going to grow phenomenally. That's what we believe. But it's taking a longer time than we anticipated. It's the same thing in Europe. It's taken much, much longer. But now it's there. It's a phenomenal growth. And, the different categories of heat pumps that we produce, they're meant for different markets, you can say. When you have like larger homes, of course, geothermal is ideal because of energy consumption, and also if you can have good cooperation with your utilities so they can utilize their, so to say, theoretical output in a more economical way. Then in Sweden, where you insulate your homes, for instance, so well, then you need a lower wattage per square meter or per square foot. So then we use more what we call exhaust air heat pumps, like using the ventilation air, because you have to ventilate your house every other hour, and you have to recapture that energy otherwise lost.
Well, you mentioned that earlier about exhaust air heat pumps, and certainly there's a company called Rayhow. It's a German company. They're based here in North America as well, and they had a very interesting system that was like that too, which is a nice way to segue into this unit that we're leaning on.
Yeah.
So air to water in North America is a tiny market. So if you know this, the global market is about 3.1 million air to water units.
Right.
But in North America, it's so tiny. Depending on who you ask, you can go anywhere from no units to 6,000 units to 100,000 plus.
Yeah.
What excites you about this air to water technology, and what do you see happening in North America with it?
Well, we hope that we're going to see the same growth in North America as we've seen in Europe. This is something, that is slightly less expensive, and depending on the zone where you have your house, how cold it is in the wintertime and how warm it is in the summertime, this is a good solution for where you have a fairly moderate climate rather than having it very, very cold. So, and the price also kicks in, because here you talk about the looping, which is typically quite expensive, but at the same time you have almost an eternal source of energy.
Yes.
So you can always argue back and forth, but rather than doing that, we are providing ground source and air to water and exhaust air, trying to be more scientific about things, you know, not saying, but you should have that. I say, for your particular home or your particular house, this solution we think would be best. And in Europe, the air to water has really taken off. And the more you go south, or the further you go south, the more popular they are.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting because any way you look at it, a geothermal heat pump is the most efficient. Like, there can be a lot of people that want to argue that, but when we get down to brass tacks and the science, it's there.
Yeah.
But an easy way to explain the value of an air to water is I'll use my own house as an example.
Right.
We have high density homes in Canada and in the United States.
Yeah.
For me, I would love to put a water furnace heat pump in my house, but I don't have the property. My yard is tiny.
Exactly.
So for me, putting one of these in was ideal. This air to water doesn't get me to that geo level of performance, but it's much better than an air source piece of equipment, like traditional air source, and it allows me to use water.
Yeah.
When we're using water, the performance that BTUs is significant. Is there a similar unit to this that Nibe would use in Europe to what Enertech is developing for North America?
This was actually developed in Europe, in Sweden. And then Steve and the folks at Enertech that saw that. That's something we would like to bring to North America. So they not totally redesigned it exteriorly, but of course bringing into 60 cycles and all that.
Yep.
And here we see the result.
Yep.
So the embryo is sold in Europe, but it's called 2025, and here it's, you know, it's a Americanized product, or North Americanized.
North
product.
Americanized. We got to be good for the Canadians too.
Absolutely.
What I like about this product, and what a lot of people, like stakeholders in the industry, like, is we like that this is actually originally a Nibe product.
Yeah.
You know, Tim and Steve and his team have taken this. They've built an indoor unit. They've now built a package that you can go into a mechanical room and very easily install.
Right.
But I have to say, one of the things that gives me the confidence is you guys in Europe testing this. You've gone through the trials.
Absolutely.
You've worked the kinks out. We're not getting those.
Oh, well, we are very pleased to see that they took the idea, saw the potential, and now we stand here. I'm very proud.
So what do you see the future being for home heating? Like, we've got geo, we've got air to water. 10 years from now, if you had a crystal ball, what do you think we're going to be doing?
Well, it's hard to imagine that we wouldn't stick with heat pumps. And I think that on the refrigerant side, we're going to go more towards propane and
A2Ls,
natural. Yep. That's a trend in Europe. In 2 years, we're going to be totally, you know, into 290 rather than the old refrigerants. That's one trend. Very, very low sound, very important, so you don't disturb your neighbors. Because, as you say, this is very efficient in an area where you have many, many homes.
Yeah.
But it has to be very, very low sound level, because otherwise you're going to irritate your neighbors.
Yes.
And that's been tested for years in Europe, or sold for years in Europe. So very confident that they're going to work. So I don't think that one going to supersede the other. I think that as we see in Europe now, this air to water is the largest, but I don't necessarily think that the proportion that we see today is going to remain. I think that the ground source heat pumps, they have so many advantages, and particularly when you talk about cooling. The cooling is relatively inexpensive if you don't use the geothermal idea. So I think as the temperatures are increasing, I think that geothermal going to possibly take a larger share of the market than it has today.
Yeah, I think that if I take my crystal ball out, I think we're going to see great geo growth. You see utilities like Enbridge and others that are building district heating facilities, so they'll put up a 300-unit subdivision, and they can actually go in and put in those ground loops for less money than anybody else.
Exactly.
And I also think that air to water is the future.
Yeah.
Boilers are unfortunately being phased out, so we're soon going to have heating and cooling instead of just heating from the boiler, and I think it's going to be a bright future.
Yeah, right. Well, back home, you know, in Sweden or Nordics, I mean, gas and oil, they're gone already.
Yes. You're ahead of us.
No, well, we never had the energy sources. We had no gas. We had to import.
Good point.
them.
Yeah.
But of course, mainland Europe, you know, like Holland and Britain and Italy, they had gas, and they're so easily imported from Russia, for instance. But those days are gone.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't put ourselves on a pedestal, but to be cautious with nature, to be cautious with resources. That's something instilled into our personalities.
Yes.
And that is really sustainability.
Yeah.
That word sustainability is abused, I feel, sometimes, because everyone is sustainable. But what's it really mean? You should not abuse nature. You should be very cautious with the resources, because oil and gas, they were going to be used for other generations to come.
Yes.
If we can reduce that to a minimum as far as usage and use other means of climatization, then you also introduce a betterment for mankind, if I may be a little bit philosophical.
It's true. Yeah, I think that, as a end customer of Nibe, as much as I'm interviewing you right now, at the end of the day, I am a Nibe customer. I think that the one takeaway that I look at is the collaborative nature of your company.
Yeah.
When you as a team went around and purchased all these different manufacturers, like, this is so strange, but seeing how you've done it, how you've allowed them to sort of collaborate in their own way,
yeah.
I think the future is really bright, and you guys have done an awesome job.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.